Hi.
Hello, Sky. Uh, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Yeah, I'm fine. I was just did a little bit of jogging in the park, and
Very nice.
now I'm back again and feeling fresh and happy.
Awesome.
What's your first name? Sapphire. It's
Yes,
Sapphire.
Sapphire.
Yes,
hmm
Sky, Sapphire, and Sky. These are two first names. They have two first names.
Yep.
Yeah, right, right.
Just Sapphire is fine.
Okay, Sapphire. I think I'll keep that. Yeah.
All right. Well, are you ready to get started?
Okay.
Cool. So, welcome to CWC. I am so excited to have you on the show to talk about your personal journey to being a composer and your latest album of works for piano. For people who might not be familiar with your work, would you please introduce yourself to our audience?
Yes, gladly. I'm an Austrian composer and working in different fields, both chamber music and concert, and lately a lot of music theater. Uh, and I'm also using extended media, electronics, videos for my composition. But in this case, we're talking about pure chamber music. And I'm a piano player myself, and I'm not professional anymore. But since my main interest is now writing, which keeps me pretty busy. And so writing for piano has a special meaning for me, and I'm very happy to have been able to collaborate with the piano player Wolfram. We are friends. We have been friends a long time, and I also collaborated with his wife Sabine, who is an outstanding mezzo soprano. And um, so the other thing to mention here is the collaboration with the label. This is a collaboration dating back to the 90s, and I'm proud to say they featured most of my major work, both music theater, chamber music, and this is the latest of 4 CDs to be released. One was a chamber music CD for flute and double bass, and the third one is one for 4 voices and electric guitar and live electronics developed at IRCAM at Centre Pompidou at France.
That is so cool. I love hearing lots of non-traditional ensembles. I think flute and double bass is such a great timbre together. I just love the colors that it creates.
Absolutely. I was inspired by the color with this release and with these compositions, since the main composition on this CD is called Winterlicht, which means the light of winter. And Sapphire, you guessed me. This is about
Mhm.
color and about timbre, and it's an extraordinary combination: bass flute and double bass. I really love it.
That is so cool. That's going to have to be the next album of yours that I listen to.
That's cool. Yeah.
As a composer myself, I use color a lot when I'm thinking about my compositions. A lot of my pre-composing phase before I even start putting pitches to what I'm thinking starts with coloring or painting and just thinking about the different textures that I want to put together and the different colors that I'm thinking about.
Yes, this sounds interesting. It's this whole spectral thinking in spectrum and colors. It's something most intriguing, and it motorizes a whole section of new music nowadays, we can say, as it did in the late 19th century with the late Wagner and the late Debussy and Ravel. And nowadays, it's the analysis of spectra, it's microtonality, and all these things which relates to color. And in this regard, the present release is pretty monastic because it's focused on the piano, 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 and just the 88 and black and white and nothing else. And this is a very conscious step of reduction, I would say, uh, since, as you can easily guess, deducing from my age, I did write pieces for prepared piano. I did, and I lately did a piece for two prepared pianos forehand, as a prepared piano forehand, and
Ooh,
um, so I know how that works, and it's lovely in its own way. But in this regard, uh, I wrote a series of piano pieces which were really focused on playing the 88 and nothing else, and getting the colors the hard way.
that is really interesting and a great lead into my first official question. The
Right.
first thing the first thing I thought about after I had explored your album is that I was very intrigued by this concept of in-betweens that you talk about in the CD booklet. How did this concept affect your composition process in terms of technique and execution?
I wouldn't rather call it a concept. It's a state of being. Since I, as a human being, I- I'm in between. I'm in between so many genres, experiences, both in my actuality and both in my lifetime. And I'm surrounded, if I walk through the city, I'm surrounded by so many paradigms of music. And this in-betweenness, it's for me, it's a state of being. Since I have the feeling I'm in between so many different musical paradigms happening simultaneously, and my whole life was marked by many different stations in musical careers, ranging from being a jazz musician, a rock musician, an electronic musician, a live performer. I had been more than 40 years live on stage as an improviser, whatever. Um, but in this work, which is shown on this present CD, the in-betweenness is of a different kind of sort. It's in between historical reference and using refined computer algorithms on that very historical reference. This goes for the um, processing of Haydn's seven last words. I did this piece twice. I did a processing for piano, and then I did a processing for string quartet, which was also recorded on CD with Aditi String Quartet. And at this time, I used algorithms to granulate the original Haydn piece. And on the other hand, it's very expressive music which I'm dealing here. And uh, so this position as being a composer, and on the other hand, being making machines do the job, and program machines which I'm not really composing, but chopping up a piece. And um, I at this time I remember I used the metaphor. I felt rather more than a gardener. And then there are other pieces on the CD which show this in betweenness, because um, the intermezzi, the first of the intermezzi, I was sitting in this very room here and on my piano, and I felt a little bit depressed. And so I went to the piano and improvised a 10 minutes piece. And I recorded this piece. And I just transcribed it and did some cosmetics, as you can imagine. And this was Intermezzo 1. So, on the other hand, my head came in and said, I can't leave it at that. And I sent it, I took the initial phrase of this composition, which is anyway circling about this simple chord phrase, cluster phrase, and put it through the computer, like with the monadologies. And so there were two more intermezzi, 2 and 3, which were computer processed pieces. And so it's a fluctuating state in between improvisation, algorithms, free composition, and very elaborate construction in the context of the Second Viennese School.
That's really cool. I love hearing about how your personal life experiences and philosophy went into creating these different pieces and how it has affected everything, even going to the medium of how you are writing and what you use to write. This next question comes from my colleague, Dr. Madeline Rogers. She unfortunately can't be with us today because she is camping.
Good for
But
her.
she, yeah. So she gave me permission to ask a few questions that she had written
Right.
up for this interview. So here is the first one from her. As a pianist who has played many solo pieces and many transcriptions of works originally written for other settings, I'm always curious to know the compositional thought behind writing specifically for piano. As mentioned in the booklet, The Last Words was based loosely on a piece by Haydn that was reduced to the piano and string quartet after originally being composed for orchestra, and you also recomposed this piece for string quartet after the piano solo version in 2010. As a pianist, of course, I'm biased because I think it's a beautifully varied instrument with lots of expressive possibilities. But I'm curious as to what drew you to the piano as the expressive medium for this particular work in its original form.
Um, since this all deals with overriding, the reference to the original Haydn piano text was essential. And so the overriding also stuck to the piano and not to a synthesizer or a cembalo or whatever. And it's for me, it's always a ritual to write for piano. I overwrote the 12 Chopin etudes, Opus 10, and I did a whole etude cycle of etudes for piano, and I really loved these very hard tasks to write for piano without using tricks. This means to know about virtuosity on the piano and really challenge the piano player as a in the sense of a classical virtuosic piano piece. And but the conceptual background goes much further here, because this is basically a machine piece, and a piano is a machine. It's a very mechanic things. I also wrote for player pianos, and which really brought this out in a much more radical way, this automatism. And if you look at the development of virtuosity in the 19th century, this was closely connected with the rise of industrialism, to the mechanization of labor, and also to bring up speed and loudness and perfection, like with machines. And for me, the piano is a paradigm of a musical machine. and which starts to interact um, with a player. And with a violin or a cello, you are much closer to the breath of the instrument than with a piano. You can feel the strings on a piano, but it needs a lot of sensitivity and um, to to work through the mechanical aspect of the instrument. And another player has to care for tuning. It, he or she he has to find the sound. The creation has to do the creation of sound in the beginning. With the piano, you're it's like a typewriter. You press a key and you get the sound ready made. And it's not like that, there's a whole culture in developing pressing the keys. But basically, it was very near to this clockwork idea, which is behind the whole monodologies, this mechanical aspect, this robot-like aspect. And what's happening here is more or less uh, the reflection of a virtual automaton, a virtual machine in a real machine, which is the piano, engineered by a human biocomputer. And this seemed to me a rather challenging interplay and discourse.
That is so interesting. I have never personally thought about a piano as being a machine before, but the way you describe it, it makes so much sense. And then it again fits into the whole world of in betweens that you were talking about earlier between the mechanical engineering and the acoustical. That is so fascinating, the interplay between those two states of being. I love it.
I remember when I was a kid and studying the piano, I started opening it up, looking inside, and looking how it worked. And I started to, when I was 14, 15 years old, I started to experiment with this because I was intrigued by all these machinery inside, these levers and pullers and stops and whatever was inside. I was really fascinated because before it was just black and closed with a cover, and the sounds came out of it. And then I thought, what's inside this thing? And it made me discover these mechanisms which were inside. And it really intrigued me. And later on, I went on to synthesizers and electronic machines, uh, for sure. But now I'm coming back to the acoustic piano. And um, actually, I really love this game of writing for the keys and creating the sound you mentioned in the beginning, the shades of sound and the timbres of sound, just by composing on the keys.
This whole world of different waves we can just create so many different colors and timbres with. And I will never get over just how magical that feels.
Right, right, right. It's the same for me. And if you look at the intermezzo one, it's just making the piano player discover to bring different lightings in a pretty constant musical setup. And it's just playing with color and dynamics on the piano. And I think the piano the pianist on the CD does this excellently. It's one of for me it's one of the highlights of the whole CD, how he plays this intermezzo, because it's really difficult, since it has been played by a couple of people already, for sure. And when I played the improvisation, it came absolutely natural. And also the length was, I felt it with my stomach, it was okay. But it turned out that if it was being played by somebody else, it tended to be a little bit, it dragged a little bit just shortly after the middle section. And um, Wolfram worked so long on this piece till it flowed. And he does this in the concert too. It's a flow. You really realize it's over, and that's what I like about his interpretation.
When you were writing for this album, did you know you were going to work with Wolfram on any of the pieces, or was that a collaboration that came after the composing was already done?
Much later, since these pieces were done much earlier. The monadologies were performed in 2009 at a big festival in Austria. It was performed by Mario Formenti at the opening of Musikprotokoll Graz in 2009. The intermezzi, I just wrote them for myself, and um, they are, Wolfgang discovered them more or less and
Mhm.
started practicing them, and he played them together during another author, a friend of ours, who presented her novels, and he was playing them in between the novels, in
Wow.
between her readings, and suddenly he started practicing the Hassan pieces too, and um, so the idea arose to do a piano CD, which I always wished for that, and I want to have many more because I love to listen to them. Piano CDs are so nice to listen to. You can put them on and just keep on listening. And so we said, let's do a CD because that's such a nice program. I heard it in concert a couple of times, and I said, that's really nice. This is a setup which you can listen to, which is apt for doing a CD, because each CD has to have a dramaturgy. I'm a listener. I have here in my room there are thousands of CDs, really, and I'm listening and listening, and he so I always design a CD also from the aspect of listening. How would I like? How should it be? So I would like to listen to it, and I can tell you this CD is really very nice to listen to, and I hope to make another one like this.
I hope you make another one like this too. I loved listening to this album. I'm pretty sure I've listened to it all the way through like 3 times already after the first
Wow,
time.
that sounds nice. Wow.
I have an hour commute to one of my jobs, so I need something to listen to.
Right, I see.
So this next question is another one from the amazing Dr. Rogers. She is, for anyone who doesn't know, she is a doctorate of piano performance. Amazing person. She just graduated with her DMA a couple months ago. So
I see.
yeah, so I'll put for our audience, I'll put her website and stuff in the descriptions if you want to learn more about her work. So here's the question. My most recent research project was on a piece that was originally composed with the intention that the pianist improvise, but this original sketch was not fulfilling for the composer and was revised about a decade later to provide notation and clarity for the performer to effectively fulfill the composer's musical vision. As a pianist yourself and one who can obviously improvise with ease, what are your thoughts on clarifying your intent through notation and how much is left to the performer?
That's a very complex question, since it's the basic question about interpretation. And as a composer, you send messages into space, and you never know the aliens which will decode it. And in many regards, these stay aliens, and you will stay an alien, and the communication is based on reading and in doing an interpretation. a very personal interpretation of the things you wrote. And for me, is the manifold and the diversity of these interpretations is the thing. And I love to be read in many different ways. And so I think you could never prescribe all the possible ways to read a text. It's impossible. And that's the good thing, because all these different readings open up a discourse. And this discourse of interpreting a text creates a kind of community and a social space, which is expanding all over the world. And since it's a score-based text, uh, it's open to reading, much more open than a recording of an improvisation. And if I improvise this intermezzo on the piano, it would be gone. It would be a very nice moment in my life, and perhaps my neighbor was forced to listen to this. I don't know, but it would be gone. And at the moment, I created a text based on this. It became something else. It lost something, for sure. It lost a lot of presence, authenticity, and whatever. Uh, but I gained something new, because the versions which now there have actually been already two versions have been recorded on CD of this intermezzo, and they are so different, and I love it that they are different. And uh, I had in my earlier years, when I did my first music theater, I wanted to control everything. I was the super control freak. I wanted to direct myself and whatever. And then I discovered that letting loose and open your texts for everyone, and uh, I would even include misunderstanding here. There is a positive form of misunderstanding. Misunderstanding can create beautiful things. It can destroy a lot, but that, I wouldn't call it exactly misunderstanding. I would say that it somehow is being read very, very far away from primal intentions, and I like it. I say, as soon as as there are many, it depends on the manifold. It depends on the diversity, that many people read one text, and that's the incredible strength of our art form, that based we are book based, more or less. And the whole universe of reading and being read is opened by this, and this has an incredible value.
I agree. I personally love when I just finished a composition and I go to rehearse with the performers and they do something that's definitely not what I intended, but I can't say how many times I've gone, I actually like that better. Let's do that instead. Or
Right,
just it's a
right.
different interpretation, but it's just so beautiful and it's so cool.
Yes,
Um,
and I absolutely agree. And I think that it's a very different situation if you have one performance of a piece, or if you have many performances of the same piece. Because in the first performance, I tend to do the very thing you do. Say, please do it like
mhm.
this, please do it like this, and this, and this, and this. But as soon as you have done this, there exists a first version. And the next one refers to this version already, or is able to refer to this version. And the game is on. So um, it's um, uh, it's expanding and changing. And I now heard interpretations of pieces I wrote in the 80s now being played again now in the late 2000s and during the last years, and you wouldn't recognize the piece. It's so changed and it's so different. And I think this is a value in itself, that the interpretation has a history and um, is a part of a process, of a changing process.
That is almost just crazy to me. I haven't even been around long enough. I think the most one of my pieces has been performed right now is 3 times. Um,
But that's
and so
something.
it's so
Uh,
cool to hear how it for you it has changed over time. I've never really thought that much about how repeat performances change a piece.
as soon as you wrote a score, a text, I love to use this image of message in a bottle, of a message in a bottle.
Mm.
You throw it into the sea of time and see what happens. And it's really now I'm now an old man, and I see that the scores probably will survive me. it's it's
And
something which is floating in space and in time, and becomes something independent.
who knows, maybe one day someone will be doing research about one of those pieces and they'll stumble upon this podcast too.
Or yours
True,
could be
maybe.
the same. It's the same. Yes.
So the sonatas from this album are the fifth episode of a larger series. Why choose to use this term you call cellular automata process, and why? What's something you think people who haven't studied musicology will still find intriguing about this writing process?
That's really hard to explain without showing it. There's whoever would be interested in this, I would really encourage to show to see some videos by John Conway, um, or Stephen Wolfram. We find tons of this on the internet, and just watch it. Just watch Cellular automata work, and it's easier to show than to talk about it. These were actually automata I used creating Monadology 5, and there were more than 30, 40 monadologies later. And the idea goes basically back to Haydn, because Haydn created a sonata, um, type of sonata which is called monothematic sonata form, and is based on the very principle of evolving a piece from a single cell. The second theme in the monothematic sonata is being created through transformation from the first theme, and this whole way of developing musical textures from a cell um, is already very closely related to cellular automata. And if you look at the rise of the developing principle in the 18th century, and leading later to the technique of developing variation in the 19th century, so it all goes back to this biological idea, to this biological image of having a seed, a cell, which is going to mutate and branch off and grow. And these mechanisms of growth can be created or simulated by cellular automata. And that's what I did. I just took one single bar of Haydn, put it into the automaton, and there was the score. But it was never that easy. I'm simply lying here. Um, I had I had to work more with this automata than I would have if I had written it by hand, which I later did. In the later monadologies, I just skipped the computer. I went back to writing this all out by hand. But at this time, I really programmed my heads off in C++ and did all these algorithms. And what I did at this time was, that's why I called myself a gardener then. I did runs and runs and runs and runs for days and week of this single cell, trying out different rules, different algorithms again and again, and listening to it again and again, listening to it, and whatever. And then I cut the whole process. I granulated the whole process, and the result was the final score.
So this is one more question from Dr. Rogers. The musical world has been impacted greatly by a rich history of pianists slash composers. How do you view yourself as someone who is proficient on the instrument you compose for? Do you find joy in playing your own pieces, or is it something that you are happy to release to other pianists for performances and recordings?
That's very simple. I'm not good enough anymore. Um, I I can still play my Mozart sonatas and my Beethoven sonatas and perhaps a few Chopins, but I'm not good enough to play these highly virtuosic pieces. Some of them, perhaps. I started to practice the Chopin etudes in my version a little bit, but I know professional players, and we are in an age of specialization. It would, for me, it would make no sense to practice them for 4 or 5 hours a day to get them running. If other people are simply better at doing this, and I, it's also the other thing that I love to be played by somebody else, because it's a new way of looking things. We discussed this already before, and this is another reason why I prefer to collaborate with players, and that's a very interesting game to work together with a pianist in the birth of a new piece. And for example, I have a wonderful friendship with the leading Belgian interpreter for piano music, for new piano music, Dan Wanderwalle. And we have been friends for decades, I have to say. It goes back to the early 2000s when we first met in Czechia, and we were always discussing philosophy, arts, and whatever. And we never thought about collaborating till one day, just last November, he did a whole recital with my pieces in Transit Festival, and uh, it worked so well because we knew each other very well, and he really grasped my music in a second, and this affinity, this personal affinity, really was reflected in his interpretation, and it was really wonderful. And this is much more exciting than practicing them myself. I rather use the time for writing another piano cycle.
That is how I personally feel as well, with clarinet instead of piano. I can play chords on the piano. That's basically my skill.
Yeah, right.
Um, but I've been playing clarinet for since I was a kid, but I am not nearly as good as my colleagues who have dedicated themselves to specializing on the clarinet. And I know that they will do a better job than me, as much fun as it is to write the pieces. And same as what you said, the collaboration of seeing how they do it, their artistic liberties, the choices they make, it goes into making, in my opinion, a very deeply connected piece.
I agree. I agree. But what's behind the original question is a very, very important thing for me because I keep up practicing the piano. Even if I'm 64 now, I still practice the piano, and it gives you these, I would say, down to earth touch to things. So you always have to, as even as a composer, and especially as a composer, you always have to think about that people have to play this and to be
Hmm.
able to play that. And as soon as you're practicing yourself and you're playing the clarinet, you stay in touch. You needn't be the first clarinet player in the orchestra, but you stay in touch. And um, whenever I write for a solo instrument, this answers the question perhaps a little bit better. I take the instrument home. I I try. When I wrote the violin concerto, I just studied a little bit of cello. I'm no violin player, but I tried on the violin. And I wrote a piece for four guitars. I unpacked my guitar. I tried on the guitar. It's a very important thing for me to get this musicianship touch in my writing. So it's always close to the player and to practicability. And if I write something which is not playable, I consider this a mistake, an error and a mistake. So I redo it. I redo it. It's I Okay, there are pieces who stay a little bit. We discussed this with Wolfram when
Hmm.
we discussed the first movement of the Monadology 5, which is nearly impossible to play, and I like this nearly impossible touch in this first piece, and it should stay like that. It should
Hmm.
really remain a challenge, but it must not overstep this because for example, on the guitar, you can simply write rubbish. I did some mistakes in this piece. They wrote back to me, dear Bernhard, this chord is not playable. And then I realized I just wrote one string too many. I
Hmm.
forgot to erase a note from the chord. And these are simply mistakes, but you it wouldn't be my strategy to write apart from the player from and I think staying in touch with your instruments and I improvise on here on the synthesizer. I practice my piano. I try to stay in touch.
Absolutely. Staying in touch as a musician is very important. I have had my fair share of sheet music given to me that is not playable. And so I think playability is so important. All right, I have just one more question for you. Any last words for aspiring artists who are listening to this interview?
I think it's the whole relationship between a composeress and her musicians are based on trust. And if this trust is kind of damaged and hurt, so cynicism starts to grow. And this composer doesn't know his way around the clarinet. Why does he write for it? He should go to school and start and whatever. You heard this many many times in rehearsals. So it's really important to bond with the musicians to create a bond of trust uh, to to expand and to develop. That's very clear.
Well, thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you have a great rest of your evening.
Thanks, Sapphire. It was a pleasure, and time passed quickly, which is a good sign. And I wish you a lot of inspiration for your writing and for your works. And perhaps we meet again one day.
Hope so. Thank you so much.
Take
Bye.
care.
Hi, guys. Thank you so much for listening today. It was an honor to have Mr. Lang on the show to talk about his new album. If you would like to give that a listen, the link is down in the description. It'll take you to KAIROS, the record label, where they will have the album on Spotify and CD for you to listen to. Also, a big thank you to Dr. Madeline Rogers for contributing questions to this interview. It was great to have a professional pianist description and ideas to contribute to the interview. Go ahead and click her links down below along with Mr. Lang's to find out more about the people that brought this show together. Thank you to IES Abroad and Palladino Media for giving me the internship to make this show possible. Make sure you guys like, subscribe, share to help this podcast get off its feet and become all that it can be. Have a great rest of your day, guys. Bye.